What happens when the most controlled woman in pop culture decides, for once, to stop smiling and challenge the man holding the questions? Subscribe to Prime Tale and like, comment, and join the conversation right now, because what unfolded next on live television shocked everyone watching. The studio lights were hotter than usual that night, or at least that's how it felt. The applause rolled in waves as Beyonce Knowles Carter stepped onto the stage of The Late Show, dressed in an immaculate black suit that caught the light like polished armor. She smiled, measured, graceful, practiced, but there was something else there too, something tight behind the eyes. Stephen Colbert rose from his desk, clapping enthusiastically, delivering his usual witty welcome, his voice steady, his posture relaxed. To the audience, it looked like just another legendary guest appearance. To the cameras, it was business as usual. But beneath the polished surface, tension hummed like a live wire. Beyoncé took her seat, crossing her legs slowly, deliberately. The crowd erupted again, chanting her name. She nodded, acknowledging them, but her gaze never quite left Colbert. He cracked a joke about her tour, about how even the Secret Service had trouble getting tickets. Laughter followed. Beyoncé laughed too, but only briefly. A flash, then gone. Her hands folded in her lap. She inhaled. "So," Colbert said, leaning forward with that familiar late-night curiosity, "you've been very selective with interviews lately. Almost strategic." There it was. The word hung in the air. Beyoncé tilted her head slightly. "Strategic," she repeated, softly. Colbert chuckled. "Well, careful. You don't say much unless it matters." A ripple passed through the audience. Beyoncé's smile returned, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "Or," she said, voice calm but firm, "unless the question is worth answering." The cameras zoomed in. Somewhere backstage, a producer glanced up from a monitor. Colbert raised his eyebrows, playful but alert. "Fair enough. So let me ask you something worth answering." Beyoncé leaned back, waiting. "You've built an empire on empowerment," Colbert continued. "But critics say you control your narrative so tightly that there's no room for real challenge. No pushback. What do you say to that?" The audience murmured. A few gasps. This wasn't the soft opening people expected. For a moment, Beyoncé said nothing. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10. On live television, it felt eternal. She looked out at the audience, then back at Colbert, as if weighing something heavy in her mind. "What I say," she finally replied, "is that challenge doesn't always come from people with microphones." A sharp intake of breath echoed from the front rows. Colbert nodded slowly. "But you're here now, on my show, with my microphone." Beyoncé's eyes locked onto his. "Exactly." The temperature in the room shifted. Even the band seemed to sense it, sitting unusually still. "You see," Beyoncé continued, her voice smooth but edged with steel, "women, especially powerful women, are told we're unapproachable the moment we stop explaining ourselves. The moment we stop shrinking for comfort." Colbert opened his mouth to respond, but she kept going. "So when you call that control, I hear something else. I hear fear of not being able to shape me." The audience erupted. Applause thundered through the studio, loud enough to rattle the cameras. Colbert smiled, but it was tighter now, more calculated. He raised his hands, letting the noise settle. "That's not fear," he said. "That's curiosity. Journalism." Beyoncé leaned forward for the first time. "Then be curious about this," she said. "Why is it that when a man protects his image, he's called brilliant, but when I do it, I'm called guarded?" The band softly struck a note, instinctively filling the silence. Colbert glanced sideways, then back at her. This wasn't on the cue cards. "Because," he said carefully, "you're bigger than most men in this industry." A pause. Beyoncé smiled again, but this one was different. Slow. Knowing. "And that," she replied, "is exactly the problem." A hush fell over the crowd. No laughter. No clapping. Just attention, raw and focused. Somewhere in the control room, a producer whispered, "Where is this going?" Colbert shifted in his chair. The playful host persona slipped, just slightly, revealing the sharp mind underneath. "Are you saying the media treats you unfairly?" "I'm saying," Beyoncé answered, her voice dropping, "that the media often asks women to bleed on camera and calls it honesty." A few audience members nodded vigorously. Others looked stunned. Colbert tried to lighten the tone. "Well, we're not asking you to bleed tonight." Beyoncé's eyes flicked to the camera. "Not intentionally," she said. But intention doesn't erase impact. Another wave of applause crashed through the studio, louder than before. This time, Colbert didn't interrupt it. He waited, hands folded, jaw set. When the noise finally died down, he leaned in. So what do you want from interviews like this? Beyoncé took a breath. For a split second, the mask slipped. The audience saw something raw, fatigue, resolve, fire. I want honesty, she said. Not traps dressed as questions. Not respect disguised as praise. Real conversation. Colbert nodded slowly. Then let's have one. Beyoncé met his gaze. Good, she said. Because I'm not here to perform tonight. The crowd gasped as one. The camera zoomed closer. The band went silent. Social media feeds across the world began lighting up, fingers flying, clips already being clipped, captions already being written. Stephen Colbert straightened in his chair. Beyoncé sat perfectly still, unblinking, unyielding. And everyone watching could feel it. This was no longer an interview. This was a confrontation. The air felt thicker after that sentence, like the studio itself had leaned in to listen. Stephen Colbert adjusted the papers on his desk even though he didn't need them. Beyoncé remained motionless, her presence commanding without a single gesture. The audience, sensing history in the making, quieted themselves instinctively. Phones were lowered. Breaths were held. Colbert broke the silence first. If you're not here to perform, he said carefully, then what are you here to do? Beyoncé's eyes softened for a brief second, then sharpened again. To speak, she replied, without being reduced to a headline tomorrow that says I was too emotional or too defensive. A nervous laugh rippled through part of the audience. Colbert smiled faintly. That's not how we operate. She raised an eyebrow. Isn't it? The question landed heavier than a statement. Colbert opened his mouth, closed it, then leaned back. You've been in this industry long enough to know late night thrives on tension. It's part of the dance. Beyoncé nodded slowly. And some of us are tired of dancing on demand. That earned another round of applause, but this time it was uneven, half thunderous, half hesitant. The room was divided between awe and discomfort. Colbert tapped his pen against the desk. You're one of the most influential people alive, he said. People don't just watch you, they follow you. Don't you think that comes with responsibility to be challenged? Beyoncé leaned forward again, resting her elbows lightly on her knees. Challenge me, she said. But don't confuse challenge with provocation. Colbert met her gaze. Where's the line? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out at the audience, at the faces staring back, young women, older couples, fans who had grown up with her voice in their headphones. The line, she said quietly, is whether the question is about truth or about control. A murmur swept through the crowd. Somewhere backstage, a producer's hand hovered over the commercial break button. Colbert exhaled through his nose. You think I'm trying to control this conversation? I think, Beyoncé replied, her tone steady, that this format often pretends to be curious while steering people into boxes that make viewers comfortable. The band leader shifted in his seat. The camera operators exchanged quick glances. Colbert straightened. Then let me ask you this, honestly, he said. Do you ever worry that by protecting yourself so fiercely, you're distancing the audience? Beyoncé's lips pressed together. For the first time, something like pain flickered across her face. I worry, she said slowly, about what happens when I don't. The room went still. I've given the world my voice, she continued. My body, my joy, my pain. And every time I do, someone takes a piece and tells me it belongs to them. So yes, I protect what's left. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. Applause broke out again, this time more unified, more emotional. Colbert nodded, visibly moved, but he wasn't backing down. Some would say that vulnerability is what made people love you in the first place. Beyoncé smiled faintly. Vulnerability doesn't mean availability. That line hit hard. Social media timelines exploded in real time. Colbert paused, then laughed softly. You came ready tonight. I came honest, she corrected. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Then be honest with me. Do you trust the media at all? Beyoncé considered the question, her fingers interlacing slowly. I trust people, she said. Systems. Not always. The audience hummed with quiet agreement. Colbert tilted his head. And you see me as part of that system. I see you, Beyoncé said, meeting his eyes, as someone who has the power to shift it or reinforce it. That landed differently. Colbert's expression changed, something thoughtful replacing the defensive edge. So this isn't just about you, he said. This is about everyone watching. Beyoncé nodded. It always is. A beat passed. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was charged, electric. Colbert smiled, genuinely this time. You know, people warned me this interview might be intense. Beyoncé chuckled softly. The first real laugh of the night. They warned me too. The audience laughed with them, tension easing for just a moment. But intensity doesn't scare me, Colbert continued. Avoidance does. Beyoncé's smile faded, replaced by seriousness. Then don't avoid the truth, she said. Ask better questions. The band played a quiet transition note, unsure whether to lighten or underline the moment. Colbert nodded slowly. All right, he said. Here's a better one. The studio leaned in again. What does it cost you, he asked, to always be Beyoncé? For a long moment, she didn't respond. Her gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted again. When she spoke, her voice was softer than anyone expected. It costs silence, she said. In rooms where I want to scream. It costs restraint when I want to react. It costs being misunderstood so I don't have to be explained. A pin could have dropped and been heard. And some nights, she added, it costs sleep. Colbert swallowed. That's heavier than I expected. Beyoncé looked at him gently now. That's the part people don't ask about. The audience rose in a standing ovation, not loud but sustained, filled with respect. Colbert stood as well, instinctively, clapping along, his host instincts momentarily overtaken by something human. When they sat back down, the atmosphere had shifted again, but not back to comfort. It was deeper now, more dangerous. Colbert leaned toward her. Do you feel heard right now? Beyoncé looked straight into the camera. I feel seen, she said. And that's rarer. The red live indicator glowed brighter than ever. And somewhere between the applause, the silence, and the weight of her words, it became clear. This conversation was no longer just unfolding in the studio. It was spilling out into the world. The applause faded, but the energy didn't. It lingered in the air like static after lightning, crackling, unpredictable. Stephen Colbert glanced briefly toward the band, then to the producer's corner, then back to Beyoncé. The show clock was ticking, but no one dared rush this moment. Cutting away now would feel like blinking in the middle of an earthquake. Colbert cleared his throat. You know, he said, attempting a half-smile. This is the part where I'm supposed to pivot to something lighter. A game. A joke. Beyoncé tilted her head. Are you going to? The audience laughed nervously. Colbert exhaled. I don't think I can. Then don't, she said simply. That was it. The final permission. Whatever safety rail existed before quietly disappeared. Colbert folded his hands together. People accuse late-night shows of pretending to be progressive while still benefiting from old power structures, he said. They say we punch up in monologues but punch down in interviews. Do you believe that? Beyoncé didn't hesitate this time. I believe intention matters less than outcome. A murmur rolled through the crowd. When a question reinforces the same narratives people have used to police women for decades, she continued, it doesn't matter how clever it sounds. It still does the same damage. Colbert nodded, but there was tension in his jaw now. So you think I crossed that line tonight? I think, Beyoncé replied, choosing her words carefully. You stepped on it without realizing how sharp it was. The audience reacted audibly. Some gasps, some applause, some stunned silence. Colbert leaned back, absorbing it. That's hard to hear. She met his eyes. Growth usually is. For a brief moment, the power dynamic flipped completely. The interviewer looked like the one being examined now, sitting under invisible lights, every expression scrutinized. Colbert laughed quietly, shaking his head. You know people are going to say you came here to lecture. Beyoncé's lips curved into a knowing smile. People say a lot of things when they are uncomfortable. A few audience members snapped their fingers in approval. But let me ask you something, Colbert said, leaning forward again, his voice lower, more personal. Do you ever worry that moments like this, calling it out publicly, will make people afraid to talk to you? Beyoncé's expression hardened slightly. I worry more about people being comfortable misunderstanding me. Silence fell again, heavier this time. I've spent years being palatable, she continued, softening my words, letting things slide. And still, I'm called intimidating. So if honesty scares people now, maybe honesty was never what they wanted. The camera cut briefly to the audience, faces locked in attention, some wide-eyed, some nodding slowly. Colbert rubbed his chin. "You're putting me in an interesting position," he said. "Because if I push back, I look defensive. And if I agree, I'm admitting fault." Beyoncé shrugged lightly. "Accountability feels like that." The crowd reacted instantly. Applause burst out, louder than before, almost drowning out the band's instinctive sting. Colbert laughed, louder this time, but there was no humor in it. "You're good," he said. "Dangerously good." "I've had a lot of practice surviving rooms that weren't built for me," she replied. That line hit differently. The room felt smaller somehow, more intimate, like everyone had been invited into a truth they weren't supposed to hear. Colbert's voice softened. "Do you think shows like mine can change?" Beyoncé looked at him for a long moment. The tension eased just a fraction. "Yes," she said, "but only if the people running them are willing to be uncomfortable on camera, not just the guests." A producer in the control room whispered something urgently. The countdown to commercial was flashing red. Colbert glanced off camera, then back at Beyoncé. "They are telling me we need to break." Beyoncé nodded. "Of course. But," Colbert added, "I don't want to end this like nothing happened." The audience leaned forward collectively. Beyoncé looked straight into the lens again, her voice calm but commanding. "Then don't." The silence that followed was louder than any applause. Colbert turned fully toward the camera. "This is live television," he said. "And sometimes live television reminds you that you're part of the conversation, not above it." He turned back to Beyoncé. "When we come back, I want to keep going, if you're willing." Beyoncé met his gaze, unwavering. "I'm not the one who's been holding back." The crowd erupted. Not just applause, cheers, whistles, standing ovation. The band finally played, but even the music sounded restrained, like it didn't want to interrupt. As the show cut to commercial, cameras caught Beyoncé taking a slow breath, shoulders rising and falling. Colbert leaned toward her, saying something off mic. She nodded once, expression unreadable. Across the internet, clips were already spreading. Captions flew. Beyoncé just took over Colbert. "This isn't an interview, it's a reckoning." Live TV history. In living rooms, phones buzzed non-stop. Group chats exploded. People argued, praised, criticized, rewound. And backstage, producers debated in hushed, urgent tones. Should they steer it back? Lighten it up? Or let it burn? The red light flicked back on. They were live again. Colbert faced the camera, visibly more serious than before. "We're back with Beyoncé," he said. "And tonight's conversation has taken a turn I didn't fully expect." Beyoncé looked at him, calm, centered. "Ready? But maybe," Colbert added. "That's exactly what needed to happen." The audience applauded, slower now, more deliberate. Beyoncé leaned in slightly. "Conversations don't turn," she said. "They reveal." Colbert nodded, and everyone watching knew whatever happened next would not be forgettable. The applause faded into something quieter, heavier, no longer excitement, but anticipation. Stephen Colbert sat differently now, shoulders squared, humor stripped down to honesty. Beyoncé remained composed, but there was a visible release in her posture, like someone who had finally said the thing they'd been holding in for years. Colbert took a breath. "I've done this show a long time," he said slowly, "and I can count on one hand the moments where I felt the room change permanently. This feels like one of them." Beyoncé didn't smile. "Then don't rush past it." The audience murmured in agreement. "I won't," Colbert replied. "But I also know what happens after moments like this. Headlines, clips, people choosing sides." Beyoncé nodded. "They already have." He glanced toward the camera. "You're right. They are watching this through filters, politics, fandom, ego." She leaned forward slightly. "And that's fine," she said. "But what they can't say is that I didn't speak clearly." The crowd erupted again, not wild this time, but resolute. It sounded like understanding. Colbert looked at her. "Do you regret coming tonight?" For the first time, Beyoncé smiled, soft, tired, real. "No," she said. "I regret how rare nights like this are." That landed like a quiet explosion. Colbert nodded, eyes reflecting something close to humility. "Then let me say this," he said, turning to the camera again. "If tonight made you uncomfortable, that might be worth sitting with." Applause rolled through the studio one last time as the band gently played them out. The credits began to roll, but the energy didn't dissipate, It followed the broadcast out into the world. Within minutes, social media ignited. Clips flooded timelines. Beyoncé's lines were turned into captions, subtitles, bold white text over dramatic close-ups. Vulnerability doesn't mean availability. Conversations don't turn. They reveal. I'm not here to perform tonight. Some called it legendary. Others called it confrontational. Think pieces appeared before the show even finished airing on the West Coast. Was Beyoncé too aggressive? Was Colbert exposed? Was this bravery or spectacle? By morning, every major outlet had weighed in. Commentators debated tone instead of substance. Fans dissected body language frame by frame. Critics argued whether this was a necessary reckoning or an uncomfortable overstep. And yet, no one could look away. Colbert addressed it the next night, briefly. Last night wasn't easy, he said. But it was honest. And I'm glad it happened. Beyoncé didn't tweet. Didn't post. She didn't need to. Her words were already everywhere, on protest signs, in classrooms, in late-night conversations where people finally named feelings they'd buried under politeness. The moment had escaped the studio. It belonged to the public now. And maybe that was the most unsettling part of all. Not that a confrontation happened live on television, but that it resonated so deeply because so many people recognized themselves in it. A woman who refused to shrink. A system forced to listen. A conversation that refused to be wrapped neatly before commercial break. This wasn't a viral clip anymore. It was a mirror. Now it's your turn. What do you think really happened that night? Was it confrontation, honesty, or something the media still isn't ready to name? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if you want more explosive, cinematic stories that pull you inside moments the world can't stop watching, make sure you subscribe to Prime Tale, because the next story is already unfolding.